Well, it's vital to both our ecology and our economy. In fact, we can't live without it, but most of us take it for granted. Tonight, why should we care today about tomorrow's water? And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned. The 9 Network has convened a network of partners, many of whom are here tonight, who are all committed to the health of water in our region, and we're working together on Water Matters STL. The goal is to help our community understand how the health of our people is connected to water, lands, and economies. Joining us first tonight to get the show started is the former director of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, Steve Mahfood. Steve, why are we having this conversation? You know, unless a person just got Facebook like this year, then everybody in St. Louis knows we have the best tasting water in the country. That was going around online for a while. Why is this important? If you're at a dinner party, you know a lot about water. What would you corner someone and tell them about water?
Well, you know, water, one of the basic facts of water is that's the basic part of our lives is water. How we live in the St. Louis area and our heritage is all tied to water. It's very ephemeral, it's here, quality can go up and down, quantity can go up and down. So it's very important that we understand that it's not something we look at just now. We have to plan and look ahead in the future and make sure that we're vigilant and making sure that water quality and water quantity is always here for us.
Those are 2 big rivers, though. That water's not going anywhere.
But you know, the water doesn't come from here. It comes from a couple thousand miles northwest of here, about 1,000 miles north of here. And as the climate changes and as weather patterns change, we see decreasing rainfall, increasing sometimes rainfall, but the trend is not able to be judged at this point in time as to what the future is going to look like. So we're always got to be vigilant. We got to plan and make sure that we understand that we're ready for the future so that our quantity and our quality is always there.
You mentioned our region is founded on water.
That's right.
You know, you can barely see the river from downtown. Most people, I would argue, don't think too much about it. Is water on the minds of people?
You know, a lot of times it's not. I think a lot of the people that we'll talk to here tonight and the awareness that Channel 9 is trying to get to people is that water's our heritage here in the St. Louis area. We have unfortunately over the years turned our back on the rivers. We need to turn around, reface the rivers, and understand that the health of those rivers, so goes the health of those rivers, so goes the health of our citizens and our economy here in the St. Louis area.
You mentioned what we'll hear tonight. I think we might also hear some talk of innovation in this area. What does that even mean?
Well, you know, how we deal with the amount of water that we use by being better at conservation, by being better at how we treat the water once it's been used, being more efficient, use less energy, being more green. And I know it's an overused term, green, but it really has a lot of effect to be biological in your thinking rather than engineering in your thinking. By being better biologists, we can handle the issues surrounding water, I think, better than if we try to force it into something that it's not.
Maybe the way we used to interact with our water eons ago, a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a real respect by folks, pre-Columbian folks that were here with the water resource that they had. And we seem to think, as we did with our forests, same thing with our water, that it was endless. We could dump whatever we wanted to into the water, cut our forests down, which also affects our water quality. But we can't do that. Growing population in the United States, growing needs for water, we have to be resourceful and we have to be careful.
Steve, thank you. Don't go anywhere. We want you here for the rest of
Great,
the show.
thanks.
Thank you. Can I say this is a fluid topic, or is that too early for puns? I don't know, but it's a broad topic for sure. So I think we'll start off. Thank you, I appreciate it. We'll start off by talking stormwater and our sewers, something that at any time, especially I think come spring, people are going to become intimately familiar with, depending on where you live in our region. Let me introduce the people at the table to help us talk about that. From the River to Pear Watershed Coalition, the director of that coalition, Steve Nagel, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Casey.
Holly Neal, Executive Director, Missouri Stream Team Watershed Coalition, and Todd Samsel, Missouri State Director for the Nature Conservancy. Okay, so why is stormwater significant? Kind of break that down. You don't have to raise your hand. I jump right in. That's a good sign that you're eager. No, I appreciate it.
Well, we've talked about which questions we might try to ask and answer, and it would probably be good to have Metropolitan Sewer District here, but they've been such a good partner in helping us clean up the streams and rivers. And water, the water quality, our organic law that we go back to, 1972, then 1977, that was the attempt by American people, passed by Congress in 1972-77 with some amendments, to look at stormwater runoff. First it was what comes out of the pipe, which is a point source, and then what comes off the land, that nexus between the land and the water that does pollute the streams. And in the case of the city of St. Louis, as in other Midwestern urban cities, urban communities, we have an aging water infrastructure.
I've heard we have wooden drainage under our downtown from the Civil War era.
The first sewer built in St. Louis was built in 1850. So we have probably about 350 combined sewer overflows in mainly the St. Louis, and about 75% of the area in about St. Louis and St. Louis County.
Okay, before we get too technical on me with these terminologies, real basically, when it rains, where does it go?
These are big pipes that we have that collect during rain events all the water that's running off of our rooftops and our streets and other parts of a watershed, which we'll talk about what that is. And essentially they're being collected in the drains that you see along roadways and ultimately shuttled into these large pipes. And during rain events, those are pipes that essentially carry this water to streams and rivers and other water bodies that serve as collecting points. And our combined sewer system has the tendency, when we have large rain events, to mix sometimes untreated sewage with this runoff because our treatment plants can't handle the capacity, and then that ends up running into our rivers.
Holly, hold that thought, because I think you guys have set it up perfectly. It's a dirty job, but someone had to do it, so we sent Jim Kircher into the sewers. You mentioned MSD. Yes. Jim actually got in the sewers with MSD for this report. This will set us up.
It was a sunny afternoon drive down the River to Pear. Hadn't rained for a while, so as is often the case, there was very little water in this concrete channel. But there's quite a bit more running in the sewer tunnel right below it. But they are connected, and sometimes in this combined system, the river becomes the sewer.
This is one of the overflow points here, where if we get too much rainwater coming into the system, the water will come out of here
Our guide was MSD's PR guy, Lance Lacombe, who spends a lot of time these days explaining how this system works and how it's going to change.
We are standing in a sewer. This is heading to the treatment plant, goes through there, and it will, further down from here, will intersect that very large sewer I spoke about running underneath the river Depere.
Right, and that's what we want. We want
Yes.
sewage going into the treatment plant.
During a heavier rainstorm, this chamber we're standing in right now could easily be full of water.
Yeah.
And it needs some place to go because there's not enough capacity in the system. So it would go out through these outfalls here into the river Depere.
So explain to me. The combined sewer system is used in a lot of cities and was designed before tough pollution laws. Because so much sewage was going untreated into the river, the EPA and the Coalition for the Environment sued MSD, charging violation of the Clean Water Act. In a settlement, MSD said it would spend $4.7 billion over 23 years, but not to rebuild the system.
Yeah, well, in this particular watershed in which we're standing, we're going to be building large storage tunnels. The longest of those will be 9 miles long, 200 feet below ground, and almost 30 feet diameter. So they're going to be massive, massive projects.
This was a tunnel MSD dug 15 years ago. The new tunnels will be about the same size. These projects are really expensive, and homeowners and businesses will see sewer bills go up. $4 billion, whatever.
4.7 billion, 5 billion, call it, over 23 years.
Does it solve the problem?
No, because you're always going to have a storm that can come along and overwhelm the system.
The sewer system, especially in built-up areas, gets filled up a lot faster these days because of streets and parking lots, all of those paved surfaces. Water doesn't seep, it rushes into the sewers. The tunnels are designed to keep it from overwhelming the system. But what if we could slow it down here? Well, as part of the lawsuit settlement, millions of dollars will be spent on something called green infrastructure. The Metropolitan Sewer District, of course, by definition, is in the business of building and maintaining sewers. It is also these days in the business of gardening. This is an experimental rain garden in Old North St. Louis at the corner of 14th and Clinton. It was a little early in the year to see the plants, but you can see how this has been built to catch, hold, and absorb rainwater. The drains on the street don't go to the sewers, but straight into this basin. And MSD will be monitoring to see if it does, in fact, cut back on the stormwater flow into the local sewers. And if it works on a small scale, the idea is to make it work on a large scale. So if you build the stuff you need to build, the tunnels that will handle that overflow, store it, and then push it into the system gradually, right? And you combine that with reducing flow, does that solve the problem?
It gets us to where we need to be. That's our plan.
But remember, this is a project that will be going on for the next 20 years.
Okay, thanks, Jim Kircher. Okay, so I want to talk a lot about what we just learned from Jim, but first back up for just a second there and let's talk a little bit more about how that water gets in there. What are there some challenges? They just built a parking lot across the street from my building a couple of years ago, and there was a big emphasis on semi-permeable pavement. Are there some challenges with our built environment in terms of how it impacts our stormwater?
I think green infrastructure is a less expensive way to deal with stormwater. In a 100-year flood, it may not be the end-all, but green infrastructure can reduce flooding. It can also keep stormwater and wastewater and pollutants from entering the stream by slowing down the movement of that water, either keeping it on site or slowing it down to the point where it doesn't create flood conditions. And we have a lot of success stories in the St. Louis area in terms of green infrastructure. Some of them are, go ahead.
Green infrastructure is great, but I think we need to back up a little bit and think about this disconnect we've had for centuries. We've been focusing on stormwater as this waste product. and engineers have been very good about getting the water off-site.
Funneling it where they want it to
Let's
go.
just get it, yeah, the number one goal is to get it away, but it's a change and a shift in mindset. We really need to embrace and think of stormwater as a resource, and how can we utilize it as if we keep it on-site. That's going to solve a large amount of our problem. It's just that mindset change that we've got to get to, and that doesn't happen overnight.
Farms had cisterns when they
Exactly.
collected rainwater off the roof and used the water.
When you
Exactly.
think about all of the hard surfaces in an urban and a developing suburbanizing area, those are all shuttling stormwater off of a site. And the more we think about green infrastructure, whether it's the rain gardens or green roofs or permeable surfaces like permeable pavement for parking lots and things like that, and where you can retrofit or put those in to begin with, you allow water to infiltrate into the ground instead of running off. And it helps our groundwater, it helps our streams and rivers because it's not being shuttled off. It's entering back into the system.
And it's not just stormwater. We have to remember that it is picking up everything on the ground, pollutants, and stormwater is one of our major influx of pollutants. That's where we get our major pollutants that, degrade our rivers and streams.
So how much work is there to be done? How far away are we from where we need to be? And then my second question to that would be, how does it change? Is this a top-down policy change, or is this I'm putting a rain barrel in my own yard change?
We've got a lot of examples right here in our own backyard in St. Louis. We don't have to go to too many other communities to see it happening right here. And I've been back in St. Louis for 13 years, and I'd say in the last 10 years, the idea and implementation of green infrastructure, rain gardens, rain barrels, plant material and soil, and weaving, weaving the flow of the water through sort of natural resources rather than concrete has really taken hold. And I'll give a plug here for Metropolitan Sewer District. They will be rolling out a program called Show Me Rain Gardens, where people actually in sort of competition using their own backyards to display and show off the rain gardens and to share information about how that can work. Now, that Todd brought up, the impervious surfaces of large, big box stores and parking lots, that really has to come at the citizen level to advocate for better stormwater management practices at that level.
I think the answer is really both. We need individual citizen action, and we need smart policies in place to help guide the larger actions.
And Holly, how much work is to be done? How big is the problem?
We just scratched the surface. We've got a really long road ahead of us. I mean, the years and centuries we've spent building all this impervious surface, we've got to undo all that. So it's a long road ahead of us.
And is that hard to kind of sell people on when they hear MSD is working on a fix that's 20 years away?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult for people to understand, and they don't even understand the concept of what a watershed is or why is stormwater important to us. They don't understand that concept. So we've got a lot of education to do.
Educate us quickly. What is a watershed? Because we're going to run out of time on this segment.
We gave that one.
So a watershed, if you ask a little kid, they'll say a shed that holds water, but I'm going to tell you that's not the answer.
I like that.
It's an area of the land that sheds waters to a specific river or stream. So everybody lives in a watershed. So anything that happens on that land, you're responsible for that water. When it reaches, it's going to go into your stream or river.
That's
so
our connection with
fertilizers,
water.
yeah, if you put fertilizers on your lawn, there it goes. I mean, everything
Think
you
about
do.
any area of land as a bowl, and water that hits anywhere within that bowl is going to flow to the bottom. At the bottom is the stream or river that captures all that water. That's your watershed.
And we all have a responsibility.
And if it's grease or oil from a parking lot or whatever, it's in a watershed, and it inevitably ends up in a stream or the river and then out to the ocean. So
Thank you all very much
Yeah, thank you.
for the education. And we want to get some insights from you. Find us online, #StayTunedSTL, #WaterMattersSTL. Let's take a look at what you're already saying. All right, let's go outside the studio to West Virginia, to our camera operator's hometown, he just told me, Morgantown, West Virginia, to meet Jerry Iwan, director of the National Environmental Services Center at West Virginia University. Jerry, thanks for being here with us. We appreciate your time. I want to ask you if all communities are affected equally. We just kind of learned about Watershed. We learned about the stormwater runoff, but there might be more individual issues that people are dealing with differently depending on their different communities.
Absolutely, Casey. Every communities are like people. They're all different. They all face different problems. They all have to handle those problems in the way that they're able to. Communities that are served by surface waters have a particular set of issues. Some were alluded to, runoff from non-point source of contamination. Those that are on groundwater, they suffer issues too, such as lower groundwater levels during drought. So they all have to handle their own particular issues. And the things they do have in common, though, is quality of water, quantity of water, and the public understanding of what goes into producing water.
Public understanding of what goes into producing water, is that a high understanding?
I think we could do a better job. Our line of work, yours and mine, is to educate the public. We educate the public on drinking water and wastewater. We have devices that are available to us, such as consumer confidence reports that explain to the public each year the quality of the water that are produced by their own public water supplies, such as in St. Louis. There's a consumer confidence report that's just been issued, I believe, for this year. We have 2 water companies, and they each issue a consumer confidence report. This was required by the federal government through the EPA. But I don't think a lot of people even know they exist. And if they did exist and they do read them, I'm not sure they fully understand them. So I think we need to educate the public more so that they can take care of themselves. And with such a valuable resource as water, it's imperative that we all know as much as we can about it.
Does the size of a community have an effect on their access to the quality of water, or do they deal with different issues in you mentioned St. Louis. What about our friends in our rural areas? Are they dealing with this in a different way?
Smaller communities have a much more difficult time because their access to capital to keep their infrastructure at the level in which it's needed to produce high quality water or to even obtain water is much more difficult than a large community such as St. Louis. So economics certainly plays a role. We have a lot of disadvantaged communities in this country, and agencies such as the US EPA, the US Department of Agriculture, they provide funding in the form of support for technical assistance. Also, the USDA provides loans and grants to help construct or reconstruct water systems.
Is anyone really in danger of not having fresh drinking water in this country?
Potentially, we have that danger. If we don't continue taking care of our sources, if we have failing wastewater systems that pollute our drinking water systems, and we don't have the capital or the wherewithal to correct those situations, yes, we're in danger of not having water. The reality is most of the people in this country do have a good supply, a very good supply of safe drinking water, and we want to keep it that way. But we do have to focus more attention on our disadvantaged communities, something that we at the National Environmental Service Center do, and a number of our federal agencies and state agencies also do.
Can you compare how we go about getting our drinking water clean and ready to go compared to other countries? Are there other processes that other countries are doing that maybe we could learn from?
Well, technology, of course, is our savior. It helps us to mitigate the harm we do to our own environment. We just had visitors from Central Asia last week, and it was interesting, not just to my own staff, but to some of our representatives of our federal agencies, just how similar our problems are. I think we're good at sharing our technology with other countries. I think that they are looking at techniques such as green, you've heard about, we just had a discussion on green technologies. They're looking at ways to improve agricultural practices so that we don't pollute our sources of drinking water. We're looking at better ways to produce energy so that it's not so water intensive. We're looking at a number of things. The important thing across nationally and globally is that we share this information. We can all learn from each other. Our technology is very high here in the United States. Many countries in the world, it's at that same very high level. But we have to keep learning from each other.
You know, and most of us probably don't think too much about or even care much about the processes through which our drinking water goes until there's a problem, until you hear a boil order water in one community, or one community the water's shut off completely. Should we be more educated about the processes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more we know about what it takes to produce clean water, the more we realize how important it is to keep our sources of drinking water safe. The higher the quality of our sources, the less costly it is to treat that water and to produce water. That's money we can use elsewhere. We can maintain a higher quality of life if we don't have to expend our limited funds on things that we can avoid. So we've got a protection concept that we have to maybe reinstill into our national debate about drinking water.
Jerry, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. You're live from Morgantown, West Virginia, with the National Environmental Services Center at West Virginia University. Jerry Iwan, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you, Casey. And people should realize they can approach us or check us out on the web and follow us, and we can provide information to them, further information on drinking water. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. We'll get your information on our website. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, they're a magnificent bird. They're the largest waterfowl in North America. And the winter of 1991-92, we had 5 young trumpeter swans that had been released from Wisconsin that showed up on one of our marshes.
How many did you get this year?
We had around 1,000. We couldn't get an exact number because there's so many of them, but yeah, just the largest number we've had here at Riverlands since we started seeing them. It used to be the eagles were definitely the big draw here, and they still are, but as the trumpeter swans have made a significant comeback, we see more and more of them. The public is a lot more interested in seeing the swans. People like to watch them. They have a really cool trumpeting call when they fly, and so they're quite a draw. The Mississippi River is a great water resource, and we've been able here in this area and through a lot of partnerships up and down the Mississippi Flyway, been able to improve the quality of that resource, improve the quality of water through wetland reestablishment and rehabilitation, and so that serves multiple purposes in not only providing cleaner water and a resource that we can use as communities, but also provides great habitat. The swans are just one of those. They like to forage in those marshes and wetlands, and that provides them a safe area to breed and raise young and reestablish their population.
The table is just telling me the trumpeter swan is a good sign of good water. And I think now we're going to talk about healthy land and healthy water, how those two things kind of go together as well. We'll start with introductions. Heather Navarro, the Executive Director of Missouri Coalition for the Environment. Thank you for being here. Greg Brummett, he's the Director of Conservation and Community Service with Great Rivers Greenway. Thank you for being here. Always happy to have someone from GRG on the show. And Nina Thompson, owner of Niche Public Relations, formerly with the Department of Natural Resources. So I want to ask you, are our greenways and trails directly connected to the health of our water? In the business, we call that a softball question.
Yeah, thank you very much for setting me up, Casey. Absolutely. Great Rivers Greenway started in 2000 by a thing called Prop C, which was called the Clean Water, Safe Parks, and Community Trail Initiative. So our mission's really staked in the rivers and the watersheds, and we're really a watershed organization. We're multi-county in the city, so our river ring, 600 miles of greenways all across the region, are really based on the river corridors. So we really see ourselves as a part of the water quality solution.
And I'll interrupt you just for a second because I just want to make sure we all know what we're talking about when we say watershed. We kind of talked about it at the last table, but essentially we all live in a watershed here, it's correct?
Right, absolutely.
And your definition would be of the watershed is?
Well, I'll probably explain it just as well as I think as Holly did. Essentially, it's a geographical area where all of the water in that area drains to one place. So if you were to pour water in a particular area, it's eventually going to drain to a stream, and it's going to go into a river, and eventually into drinking water and
all the things in between there
Right.
come into play. Sometimes the host exposes what he doesn't understand when he asks you to repeat it. So. But the trails you feel like are those an indicator of what we're looking at elsewhere?
Well, a couple of things that come to mind for me when I think of the trails. One, it's a great way to get people out into nature and connected to our natural resources, because I think there's a very strong disconnect, which then leads to all sorts of other problems when people don't understand why it's important, why clean air is important, why clean water is important. So it's a great way to make that initial connection for people. I think we have to look at when you're looking at these trails, the surface of the trails, the sort of fragmentation that happens where these go, there's a lot of things to consider in terms of how we interact with the environment. One of the things that I know of Greenway that GRG is looking at is, where do these trails go and how can we do them in such a way that they are helpful to the environment that they're connecting people to. And then you have to look at the surfaces, because again, when you think about we're in a watershed, and anything that lands on any particular surface is going to drain somewhere. And so are we using impervious surfaces? Are we using wood chips? Are we using asphalt? And those are all considerations that we have to think about, because what we do to the land ultimately impacts what we're doing to our water.
And just to add very simplistically, one of the things we probably need to think about is where we're placing these trails. If you ask the average urbanite in St. Louis if they've ever been to the nature center, they say no, they don't even know it's out there. So if our goal is to educate, then maybe it should be in my backyard or down the street, or we need to figure out a way to urbanize some of these trails so that we can get people on board and they begin to understand what's at issue, because I don't think the majority understand that right now.
And that's happening if you look at the St. Vincent's Greenway that starts on Delmar and is going to move eventually all the way up through Umsel.
Perfect example.
I just had a great opportunity, some GRG staff and some of our consultants got a chance to walk the Maline Creek a couple of weeks ago.
Where is that?
It's basically runs in an arc across North County from basically kind of Berkeley and Kinloch all the way to the Mississippi River. It'll eventually connect the St. Vincent's Trail at Umsel all the way to the Mississippi River, or what's called the Confluence Greenway. And it was frozen at the time, about half frozen, so it was a really interesting, pretty adventurous walk. But we saw, it was a corridor study. We're just down there kind of looking at the creek and trying to understand where the Greenway is going to go, where the trail's going to go. And also, we're very interested in how we can start to think about stream restoration when we go into these riparian areas and start to think about Greenway too. But we see all kinds of, the typical things that comes out of a stream clean, tires and hoses and all kinds of things in there. So it was a great opportunity to get down in there. But Heather's right. A lot of what we're trying to do with the Greenway is put people in nature up along the rivers. Steve Lafood earlier said that we turned our back on our river systems, and to a certain extent we have. And we hope in some ways that the Greenways, putting people out in nature and near the rivers, will create that awareness and really make people realize that the rivers have a great value from a recreation point of view, from a water quality point of view, the economy and
we just heard we have the greatest technology in the world. Somebody's taking care of this for me. I live, let's say, in the city. I have a very technical life, technology-centered life. Why does this matter to me, to the rest of the folks who aren't really interested or have the time or the affluency to go hike on a trail?
Well, I don't think it's the attitude that somebody else is taking care of it. I think it's the attitude that it's not a priority, it's not pressing. I drink water every day and I'm fine. The other issues that are pressing, we were talking about this earlier, Heather and I were talking about it, we need to figure out a way to make, when we talk about education and we talk about employment and we talk about medical care, we need to figure out a way that environmental protection is right in there with that.
And I would argue that environmental protection is really the foundation to a lot of those issues. When you're talking about, it's not the environment or health, which one do you care about? They're intertwined. What we do to our water ultimately becomes part of us. So we have to really make that connection for people. And if you're involved in technology and you go to get a glass of tap water and you think everything's fine, well, it's fine right now. For the people in West Virginia, eventually it wasn't fine.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of those threats facing our waterways as well. So we have to be vigilant.
What about how we build around? Should we be having radical conversations about how we build around these waterways that we're talking about? How does that play a role? I've talked to people who get rather upset when someone uphill from them does some paving and the mud comes down the hill.
I think we absolutely have to be thinking about those things. And I think especially when we look at our floodplains and our wetlands, every time we put a parking lot in one of those places, all we're doing is increasing the chance of flooding somewhere else. We're having major impacts on species as well. And we were talking about this with the trumpeter swan. Why is that significant? Well, it's not just about the trumpeter swan. If the trumpeter swan is not coming, then that says something about our water. I mean, and everything, and again, it's that connection. When people think, oh, environmentalists only care about endangered species and cuddly creatures. Well, we care about those cuddly creatures because ultimately we care about long-term human health.
They're
And
indicators.
They're indicator species, absolutely. And so when our waters are impaired, when our waters are dirty and polluted, that impacts the species, and ultimately we know what's coming down the pipe for us.
Quickly, should we be worried about our water here in St. Louis?
Oh, absolutely. It's as Steve said, it's the basis of life. So we have to be concerned about it. Our economy, in many ways, is based on it. Certainly our quality of life in terms of what we do when we're outside of work, recreation. Think about how many people take a float trip in this community every year. So absolutely, we need to be concerned about it.
I don't know who showed Greg the rundown, but we've got economy coming up next. We'll talk just about that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. First, let's go back to social media, though. I tell you, the Great Rivers Greenway, they know how to make connections from not only one part of town to another, but from one segment to another. That was pretty good. This is Otis Williams, Executive Director of the St. Louis Development Corporation, to talk just about what Greg mentioned. There's an economic aspect to this conversation. Real quickly, remind us, St. Louis Development Corporation is something, SLDC, we hear a lot. Just remind us what that is.
St. Louis Development Corporation is the city's economic development arm, and we're about trying to grow jobs here in the city, enhance the economy.
How much of that involves water? How much are you actually thinking about water when you're doing that job?
Well, it's a significant part. It's a major part of what we do. We have under our umbrella the St. Louis Port Authority, and we work with the regional port authorities around the area to form what we call the Metropolitan Port of St. Louis. And so it's a very significant piece, and that over 47,000 jobs are related to freight and the economy around the region.
That's a lot of jobs. It might be a little hard to maybe wrap one's head around. I mentioned earlier we don't even really see the river from downtown in a lot of areas. Sometimes I wonder if we're a little disconnected. Can you put that port into perspective when it comes to the Mississippi River or the country? How significant of a river town are we still?
We're very significant. As you know, we found it based on the river. We are now the second busiest or largest inland river port, and we're the 18th largest port of any kind in the U.S.
Okay, so how do the goods? Are we talking coal on barges, or is it more than that?
On the riverside, we are talking about a very diverse group of commodities. Basically, coal, chemical, petroleum, salt are the major ones that are coming through.
Vital commodities in our
vital commodities. A lot of food products as well. Grain is very significant here in St. Louis.
So what's on your mind? What's on your radar when it comes to maintaining this vitality as a river port when it comes to water? What are your concerns?
Well, we're very fortunate in that we are the last lock-free, ice-free port here on the river, on the main stem. And so, as previous guests have indicated, we depend upon the major watershed to ensure that the water continue to flow. So it's very important to us, as we have industries all up and down on both sides of the river here in the region, to just continue to have growth in our economy here.
Is that something that can continue to grow in terms of around the water, or is that kind of is it tapped out, to use another water pond?
No, I think water is just one mode, and so when we think of logistics and freight, we think of a multimodal configuration, with land, the air, with the highways, and with the river. And so nationwide, the river basically plays about 20% into that cycle of the modes that we talk about, and we think that's about where it fits here in this region.
So when you are talking about planes, trains, automobiles, and all the different, what's the percentage, would you say? What's the tonnage that we're talking about that water is responsible for?
Well, here in this region, the Metropolitan Port of St. Louis, we look at 36 million tons. And that's here in this region. But we see going past the arch over 106 million tons every year. And so our goal is to be able to tap into the tonnage that's actually passing along the river. So we get 36 million of it, but we have an opportunity to have some more of that tonnage as a destination for St. Louis.
Is the river in good shape? Is this highway in good shape, or does it need any work?
There are deferred maintenance items. The Congress has not has not funded the repairs of the infrastructure. They continue to be deferred, and so as that deferred maintenance goes on, we will have more decay in our infrastructure. So locks are going in need of repair, and that kind of thing.
How much are you working with towns upstream, upriver?
Well, there are a number of alliances that have been formed, and so we work with a number of stakeholders. And just recently, Mayor Slay was one of the founders of a coalition called the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, where he's working with mayors all along the main stem. And so today, we've identified there are 124 cities along the river that are led by mayors. And 60 of those mayors have already joined this organization, and so it continues to grow and try to address major issues related to the river.
Otis Williams, St. Louis Development Corporation, thank you very much for adding your perspective on how water is really tied into our economy. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we thought tonight we couldn't talk about water without talking about the Merrimack. Jim Kircher, a couple of years ago, tagged along when they were cleaning up the Merrimack, so we decided to draw on the archives for this next report.
If you wonder just what kind of difference people can make on the environment, consider what Operation Clean Stream volunteers have been doing for the past 47 years. These scenes, this story, was from a 2009 cleanup on the Merrimack River. This looks like a lot of trash. Unfortunately, it's not. It's just a little bit of the stuff that was pulled out of a short stretch of the Merrimack River. This isn't a story, though, about how all that stuff got in the river. It's a story about how it got out.
Well, we cover 500 miles of stream on this weekend. We have 75 trip leaders. We divide the river up into sections, and each trip leader takes a 5 to 10 mile section of the river. We give them everything they need to be effective: gloves, shirts, bags, first aid kits, and all that.
Today, some will be walking along the riverbanks and in the parks and filling their sacks with trash. Others, they bring their boats.
We're gonna head on down the river and see how much trash we can find and how much we can get together.
This is an event, though, that does a lot more than beautify. It raises awareness of a river that has long played an important role in local communities and lives. Before, we were driving all over the place in cars on interstate highways or staying in our air-conditioned homes. The Merrimack River provided St. Louisans with their day in the country. This was our Lake District. People were boating and swimming, canoeing, fishing, picnicking. They were also building weekend homes and the less elaborate clubhouses on stilts for when the river rose. But then things began to change. The country became the suburbs. There were more people, there was more trash, more old tires. And then when people began to find other things to do, other places to go, they left behind a lot.
When this project started, the Merrimack was a huge mess. It was bank-to-bank clubhouses, refrigerators, washers, dryers, hot water heaters, automobiles. We've literally removed 2,000 to 3,000 houses from along the river. That occurred mostly back in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s.
And look at what they were unloading downriver at George Winter Park, one of the big collection points for trash picked up on this stretch of the Merrimack.
Typical load that comes
load.
out of here?
Absolutely, typical load.
How many of these, I don't know if you're counting, but is this a steady flow of?
Steady flow, we'll have probably a couple hundred loads today coming through here. Yeah.
It's a lot, but it's also a lot less than they found when they started Operation Clean Stream in 1967.
In those early days, you couldn't go 100 feet without having your boat full of trash and debris. The situation today is amazingly a renaissance of change in terms of the way that people view the Merrimack Basin and the Merrimack Watershed and its tributaries. You actually have to look for trash today.
Well, we pulled that piece for a couple of reasons. One, you can't have too much Jim Kircher. It's always Jim plus black and white footage is gold. But also because it's some good news. I think we saw how bad it was, and then maybe if you've been there recently, you know how far it has come. And also, though, help me out if this is a bad analogy, but I think we can kind of maybe extrapolate a little bit. We'll talk about the Merrimack, but maybe some of what we talk about applies to much more of our rivers and our waterways around the area. I don't want to skip introductions, though, so let me start with Steve Harrington, the Director of Freshwater Conservation. He works with the Missouri chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Kat Dockery, Executive Director of the Open Space Council, the St. Louis region. And back from the beginning of the show, Steve Mafood, Principal at Mafood and Associates. So I don't know, is that fair to say? You were nodding when I said maybe we can kind of extrapolate from the Merrimack and learn lessons from there, do you think?
Absolutely. The Merrimack, as we see it as St. Louisans, we don't always connect it with its origins in the Ozarks. So the Merrimack River is really the Ozarks close to home. And a lot of us talk about going floating, using the Ozarks and the beauty in the Ozarks. Well, the Merrimack has all of those attributes, and it's right here in our area.
What is the significance of a major waterway like this on our region, would you say?
Well, to build on what Steve said, the Merrimack is pretty unusual. It's for being an important water source for the city of St. Louis. 340,000 households, according to Missouri American Water, get their water from the Merrimack River. That's a lot of people who depend on a good quality of water. Draining from the Ozarks, we were talking about watersheds earlier. The watershed for the Merrimack is in pretty good shape, and that's unusual for such a large city. And I think that's a real resource that we need to be thinking about how we can best protect that into the future as we build as a community, as we build in our urban centers and our suburban centers, and doing things like the stream cleanup and the history of decades of worth of stewardship that we've had on the river, especially stuff that the Open Space Council has been a part of. I think is a big part of that. We have to recognize that it is an important water source for us. Protecting that watershed and being engaged matters.
I should have asked you this at the beginning of the show. Where do we get the rest of our water, just to be clear? I mean, is it coming out of which other river or the ground?
We're getting it from all of the major river sources: Missouri, Mississippi, Merrimack, or some well water.
St. Louis gets most of its water from the city?
I'm not quite sure. Mississippi, Missouri River.
Okay.
And alluvial wells, and also directly from the rivers.
Okay. I felt like that was something I just want to make sure we had clear. So do you see it as a success? And we saw the backhoes with the trash. That's a pretty good visual right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about earlier, over the last 10 years, our volunteers have pulled out almost 20,000 tires tires alone and recycled those. So
Amazing.
while we have seen big progress, we're still working, as Holly spoke earlier, to change the mindsets of people who live in these communities and really try and find a sense of ownership. We want people to really own their watershed, to own the Merrimack and the Missouri and the Mississippi also. We really, we were talking about what makes the Merrimack the Merrimack. Well, this is definitely the recreation stream, the recreation river in Missouri. That brings a ton of economic dollars in. It brings a lot of jobs in, and it really helps promote, connectedness to nature. So we think it's really a great step in the right direction, and I think we're going to continue to see positive growth on the Merrimack and in community stewardship.
And I think there's better recognition of that, or there's growing recognition, better said, about why watershed health, from the float trips and people who go fishing in the upper portions of the watershed and even in the lower portions, why that can make an economic difference, not just from recreational fishing or float trips, but for your brass tacks, what your water bill is, for example. There's innovative techniques that we have called water funds that areas like New York City and the Cascades and even some other areas in the country are looking to have major water users pay for stewardship in the upper portions of their watersheds to keep that water in good condition. It benefits the people, benefits them when they process the water, keeps those costs down for water processing. It takes a lot of money to process dirty water.
It might cost our farmers more, though, to have to worry about what is running off. Are there some downsides here? I mean, can this be cumbersome for us as a society too?
Well, it's not always easy. But the practices, we have known good practices that work on our agricultural lands to do the right thing while at the same time providing the water and the resources that our farmers need to grow our food. It's there. These are not new, completely out of the blue sky issues and problems to resolve. We've got some real good answers available. It's just having the will to get in there and do them.
The rest of our guests are not being rude, but we like to start our post show before the show is over, so they're just going to kind of join us while we talk, and Seth is going to get that squared away. So don't mind Seth.
And stepping back to your question too, I think, talking about the agricultural lands and the farms, really all of us who you've seen speak have really focused on protecting the riparian corridor, which is the area that sits really next to the river. Kind of that stretch of land could be 50 to 100 feet right along the riverways. Say that
corridor again,
sure,
because this is a new term for me.
Absolutely. It's called the riparian corridor. And that's a really, really important area. The last 40 years of river ecology and biology has shown that area is incredibly important. It's very important to filter the water. It's very important for erosion, for preventing it.
On any river we're talking.
On any river, absolutely. And what we're finding is when farmers keep those riparian corridors set in place, it's helping significantly to make sure that their cropland isn't eroding away, that they're not losing cropland. And over time, of course, that is very economically, it's an economic benefit for farmers. So we don't think it's either or you have to do this and you're going to lose money. It's really actually showing just the opposite, that if you do implement these green practices, like Steve was saying earlier, that it's going to pay off in the long run for you individually and for the communities that live upstream and downstream.
Okay, let's get the tires out of the river because that looks bad, but everything else we can just take care of, in video we say, we'd fix it in post. Well, we'll just fix it in treatment. How about that?
Well, there's along those lines, to build on what Kat was saying, there are things that we can do to help some of the issues that, for example, we're talking about the Merrimack. All the good conservation folks around at this table and from our state and federal agencies have been working on this river for a long time, and they have a good sense of what's ailing the river and how we can keep it, improve its health. Sediment is one of those big things, and that's one of those things that we can take care of by working with farm communities, doing good stream restoration practices that can help stabilize these areas where there's a problem with sediment. Again, that sediment gets filtered out, and then you pay for that in your water bill eventually downstream. So you can get good practices. Long term, there's nothing mythological about it. There are good practices out there. It's just a matter of building awareness like we're doing on the show today.
We've got the quantity. Won't that kind of fix a lot of the problems? Won't this wash away a lot of the issues that we're dealing with here? Can someone convince me that that's...
I've got an amazing fact for you.
Okay.
We've got 45 years of success story in the Merrimack River. But in 1988, there was, at the time, the governor sort of convened a stream team concept where stream teams around the state were formed. They formed 100 of those in 1988. Today, in the state of Missouri, there are 4,800 stream teams. There's no other state in the United States that has such a commitment by local residents, citizens, to form these stream teams to go clean up the streams and work on some of these riparian issues, because a lot of the problem has to do with trash and flooding and people throwing tires into that pollutes the streams, which ends up in our drinking water and has to be treated. So I think that's pretty amazing.
And treatment's expensive.
I just want to add to that real quick is that Merrimack River now is one fine example, but a plug for the River de Pear Watershed Coalition. We also have an annual cleanup.
That's going to be a big
And the
plug.
Confluence Greenway, where the great Mississippi and the Missouri. So it's just an opportunity for a lot of people to get involved with stream team organizations in the St. Louis area. And I think Holly knows about how many members there are already.
Yeah, there's about 24,000 members in the St. Louis region alone. So it's one of our largest regions of stream team participants.
Not everything's
really
doom and
exciting.
gloom, and we do have a success story here.
Is it? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it shows that we have a lot of numbers, but we need a lot more. I mean, this is a conversation we're getting started, but we need farmers, we need businesses and industry, we need other water stakeholders, which we all are. We all need water. We need environmentalists and conservationists all coming together to have and continue this discussion, because it matters for our health, it matters for our economies, and it matters for our quality of life.
And
So
political leadership is really important.
absolutely. We've got numbers, but
Strong
we need a lot
political
more.
leadership, because what really separates the United States really from developing countries and third world countries is the fact that we do take interest in water quality. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would build even further on that, the last 50 years here in the St. Louis region, we've really focused on the rivers. It's not just the rivers that we need to focus on. We need to go to the uplands. We need to go to the suburbs. We need to go to the tip tops. We need to make sure that we're controlling erosion and make sure that we're controlling runoff, because like Holly was saying earlier, and you were saying also, Heather, all of that comes down and ends up in the watershed and ultimately affects it. So it's really a holistic issue that everybody, no matter where you're at, no matter where you live, can take a part in improving.
What we want to do is make sure that people don't look at some of our waterways as ditches. They're not ditches, they're waterways. And I think in time, and I really am confident that over time, most Americans are going to realize that their water resources are precious, and they can take pride in these streams and rivers that run through their neighborhoods, through their communities, and won't allow the degradation of these water bodies, because our health, long-term health and prosperity depends on our water resources.
Well, and our economy too. I mean, if there really are, if let's say Phoenix, Las Vegas, other places that have trouble with their water supply, I don't know, 50 years from now, I mean, this could be something that we will be glad we have protected, I guess. Is another softball there? I mean, you can't own water in this country, correct? No one can.
In this area, our laws don't. Right. Our laws don't. We have different water laws than out west, but it's not a softball when you put it that way, because it matters. We assume we have plenty of water. We're water rich in the eastern United States. I worked down south for a little bit and got to experience the southeastern water wars in Atlanta, where you had a large city, not too dissimilar to St. Louis, that was in a water crisis.
Where they're fighting over state boundaries to try to get water.
That's absolutely right. And
But we also know right here in Missouri, there are regions that are experiencing water shortages. We've had drought over the last couple of years. We've had parts of north central Missouri where farmers are running out of water for irrigation. The Springfield area in southwest Missouri has had water shortage issues. And if we have prolonged drought, like other parts of the country have seen, we do face significant problems. And so, as Steve said, it's not something we can ignore. We can't just take for granted that we have all the water we need. We need to recognize that climate's changing, weather patterns are changing, and as we grow and develop, there are more and more competing uses for that water, whether it's energy development or increased irrigation for farming, because we have to feed an increasing population. And so we have to be vigilant about our water resources.
And there are things on an individual level that we can be doing, in addition to stream teams and pulling tires out of the river. Just the way that we treat our own lawns impacts our waters and the health of our waters. And even just think about this past winter, we put a lot of salt down on the roads, and that definitely, that ended up into our waters. And so looking at alternatives, whether it's a salt brine, or looking at how often you apply synthetic fertilizers to your lawn, every time you wash your car, all of those things are running off into our water. And so I think that's something that, as individuals, as homeowners, those are things that we can start making those types of changes now that are going to have lasting
Or as
impacts.
a city, I know, having lived in
Yes.
the Northwest, they don't use salt in Portland, for instance, and they also shut down for 3 days on 2 inches of snow, but they don't use salt.
And that's a very practical application to teach me how to care about my water. You guys do a lot of that. Just don't use this on your lawn, don't wash your car and do this. And I can apply that without too much stress, too much, if not feeling too stupid because I don't know the answers. So
What is it? How do you water your lawn? You put a can of tuna, or a tuna can on your lawn, and you water only at sun up and sun down?
That's absolutely the way you do it. That's what they told us at the...
Yeah, I thought I was.
I think one of the most significant things is that we're all sitting here together talking about this, and I know it's the beginning of this, but from Great Rivers Greenways' point of view, we really see ourselves as a kind of a catalyst and a collaborating agent in the region, and we're a regional organization. And we're looking for opportunities. I just had lunch with Kat the other day. I'm meeting with Todd next week to try to figure out how we really start to create a momentum and a mass so we can really start to deal with some of these issues in a more collaborative way. And that's certainly something St. Louis always needs, right? We're not always known as a community that works together. And I see that kind of changing, and I think this is part of that. And it's a real opportunity to figure out how we start to maybe find a pilot stream restoration program that we can do together and do other things to leverage all the things we're doing together.
I think educating the next generation is really important also. And the more advocates we have for water quality policies, or policies that really recognize the importance of our water resources, the more advocates, I think, the better off we're going to be. So there's more than just us sitting here at the table, but I think somebody said we need to grow the numbers, and we're about that also.
I just want to get one last thing verified before we go. Is it true that we have more, what would be the mileage of rivers than any other state? I mean, we don't. Two questions. No natural lakes in this state. Is that true? All man-made lakes? Or is that
there are no natural lakes to my knowledge.
Right.
No.
And what about the river mileage factoid? Which
We have 110,000 miles of flowing water.
Say that again.
Over 110,000 miles.
I don't think part of the problem is we haven't mapped
all of our
water.
Wow.
so that would be on the low end estimate.
Yeah.
So how Minnesota prides itself on its 10,000 lakes, maybe we need to kind of reorient our identity to our flowing waters, as you put it.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're the Great River
State. That's a newer slogan. Yeah, we've adopted, so we're the Great River State now.
We are?
Yeah, we are. Newsflash.
I missed that memo. I am not kidding.
Over 150,000 miles, I think, if you look at it. So
Wow.
Steve probably knows.
Or more.
Or more. Right. There's always more.
Because
There's always more.
because it all hasn't been mapped. That's how much.
Right. We haven't even done a good inventory. And not only are we talking about rivers and streams, but wetlands. We haven't even really touched on wetlands. And wetlands, the biodiversity of wetlands is comparable to coral reefs, rainforests, and we haven't even started to touch on those. And those aren't protected right now under our water quality standards. So, how many hundreds of acres? And we've already lost 4 million acres of wetlands since Europeans first settled here. So that's a whole nother resource for another show.
And St. Louis is sort of ground zero for this water world, because the two great rivers, that makes us a very unique location geographically, the two great rivers that have the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi River just north of the city, and then all of the streams that we've been talking about that flow into the great rivers. And those are worth protection, and I've always said that you keep thy river will keep thee.